2 months after the departure of defensive coordinator Joe Harris-Simiak, we now have answers in terms of who will be replacing him for Rutgers, for Greg Schiano, and it's a twofold answer. The first being revealed in reporting on Monday, and now coming to you Tuesday morning, shortly after the news of the second hire. So let's break it down and talk about it here a bit. Rapid reaction from myself. First, on Monday, Matt Zenith of 24/7 Sports, first reporting that Rutgers was set to hire James Madison linebackers coach Zach Sparber, New Jersey native, Bergen Catholic alum, played for Nunzio Campanelli, former longtime Rutgers assistant, was a captain at Bergen Catholic, was a captain at Brown, and has been in the coaching ranks for a few years, was a grad assistant and defensive analyst at Duke, and then most recently, last year, linebackers coach at JMU, a very good defense, a very good G5 program. Rutgers has 2 defensive transfers that are part of the roster for next year, most notably Eric O'Neill, the edge rusher. So that's the first bit of news. And then on Tuesday, old friend of the program, Pete Thamel, reporting that Robb Smith, now coming back to Rutgers for a third time as defensive coordinator under Greg Schiano, has coached at Arkansas, Minnesota. He's most recently been an analyst at Penn State the last 2 years. Obviously a successful program, but not on all, he's an analyst. And you look at that pairing, the obvious sell, the obvious kind of tie there is that they were both at Duke at the same time. You had Smith as a defensive coordinator and linebackers coach at Duke in 2022. Sparber was there as a GA that year and was involved with the linebackers. So obviously a bit of a mentor-mentee situation. So on the face of that, it makes sense, understandable to a degree, right, that you're going to have that kind of situation. But there are details here that, as Rutgers fans, I think it's fair to A, point out, and B, be disappointed about. And again, Sparber could end up being the next Bill Belichick on the defensive, side of the ball. He could be the next Greg Schiano. It's not a personal thing or a rush to judgment on him. And Robb Smith, we know what we get in Robb Smith. And he isn't bringing anything new to the table, so to speak, right? So it very much does not feel like a program forward move in terms of this, the dynamics of it. You have a program that's been at back-to-back bowl games. You have a program that's now entering the 6th year for Greg Schiano. You have a program that more or less, I don't want to say unlimited resources. They have a lot of resources in terms of salary for coaching staff. I mean, look at the raise they just gave Kirk Shiraka. Joe Harris-Simiak was set to make 1.5. Now you're bringing on 2 guys, so you're probably going to total out more than that. And we're exactly 2 months to the date when Joe Harris-Simiak was announced as the new UMass head coach. So with that context, you wait 2 months to do this. I think it's fair to raise questions. This certainly could not have been plan A. Probably wasn't plan B or C either. Now, that's not to diminish Smith and Sparber as qualified, but let's be honest about Sparber. Just from a resume standpoint, if you were just filling the linebacker role, position coach at a Big Ten, right, essentially a P2 program, right, that's where it's trending towards, with the resources that you have, with the trending up direction that the program is headed, you probably wouldn't target a 1-year position coach, 1 year of experience position coach for your position. And not only is he getting the linebackers job, but he's going to be a co-defense coordinator. Now, obviously, he's going to learn under Robb Smith. Robb Smith is the play caller, as reported by Brian Fonseca. I believe Thamel had that too. But so certainly Sparber is someone they believe in. That's great. They're going to develop him. But Robb Smith coming back now a third time, is there an expiration date there? Obviously, that's just kind of banter, but it doesn't feel like much is changing. Obviously, Greg Schiano has made his bones on defense. It's a Greg Schiano scheme. It's a Greg Schiano defense. However, Joe Harris-Simiak was really a true riser, right? And had recently been in the same role at Minnesota. And I thought blossomed at Rutgers. And yeah, the defense struggled at times, and there was a real rough patch this past season. But I thought that he did add something to the coaching staff, to Schiano's defense. And, Robb Smith coming back, and he was at Rutgers with Schiano in the first tenure. Then he was the first 2 years of 2.0. And listen, it's hard to, I'm not even going to go through the numbers in terms of what the defensive ranks were back then. Because, it was the first 2 years. One of the years was COVID. You're rebuilding the program. I think everybody felt when Smith came back the second time that he was a placeholder and he was basically there to, get things up and running. And that when Schiano felt like things were cooking, he ultimately was going to replace him. And that's exactly what he did. So to now bring him back, it feels like a settle. That's what it feels like, and obviously they have a good working relationship. There is true value to that. From a recruiting perspective, I don't think it matters too much. There's so many recruiting eligible staff nowadays that DC isn't really that pivotal, especially when it's Schiano's schemes. So I'm not really too concerned with that. And, listen, they've been recruiting at a very high level again this offseason. There's a lot to praise about Schiano's last couple years. And obviously, I think a lot of us felt, including myself, and was pretty vocal about that we had hoped for more this past season than a 7-6 record. But the program is healthy. The program is still on an upward trajectory. And to make this kind of DC combo hire with a, by all accounts, very bright, very promising, yet very inexperienced coach with someone coming back for a third time who's essentially hasn't been super successful at any P5 stop he's been at, it's not inspiring. Let's just put it that way. So I think that it's obviously going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I think logically, Schiano is going to be very involved in the defense. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on the defense for next year. They're replacing a lot of starters. They're bringing in a lot of transfers. And the development of some of the younger guys. So it's going to be a lot to do. And again, I go back to Schiano always talking about, I mean, every day counts, right? And you're 2 weeks into spring semester. And now you're making these hires. Again, I think maybe the long-term question is, why did it take so long? And how far down the list did Schiano have to go? Now, maybe, listen, that's nothing against Sparber and Smith, and maybe they elevate the defense to a level that we haven't seen at Rutgers since. And that would be wonderful. And everyone's rooting for them to do that. But it's completely fair to question the process and question how the search went down in terms of it leading to these results. Again, you're not bottom of the barrel, year 2 in the Big Ten, Rutgers, hiring super green coaches like they did in the Chris Ash era. You're Greg Schiano. You have things starting to cook. You have some momentum there. You have more resources than you've ever had. You don't even have an AD that you really have to, an adversarial AD in the past that maybe there was he really didn't seem to have problems with Hobbs in terms of salary approvals, but there really was essentially a green light here. And Shiraka is a top 25 paid coordinator. Now, talking about the kind of rehashing of coordinators, obviously Shiraka on his second tenure at Rutgers, he's worked out the second time. So listen, I guess while I think it's fair to question this, some would say it's not fair to doubt Schiano. He knows what he's doing, and he does know what he's doing. But I just find it hard to believe that when the search opened, this was where he thought it would end up. And doesn't mean it can't work. Shiraka was questioned as well for the same reasons coming back, and it has worked. And he's elevated the offense, and has been rightfully rewarded for it. And we're going into a season where the offense there's as much hope for this offense as there's been in a very long time. With the guys they have coming back, with some of the transfers they've added, Shiraka has brought real stability. So perhaps the same can happen here on defense. But I think it's just very interesting. And I think the other thing, too, is that, Pete Thamel announcing Robb Smith. Pete Thamel's a Schiano guy. When news broke by 24/7 Sports yesterday, it very much seemed to me, and that's why I waited a day, because I didn't think it was fair to judge the Sparber news on that alone when they made it clear it's a co-defensive coordinator. I wanted to wait and see who the co-defensive coordinator was going to be. I thought maybe it'd be someone existing on staff. It's not. The rules have changed with how many recruiting assistants you have, how many on-field assistants you have. Bringing in Smith, it really didn't ever cross my mind. I didn't think that was going to be where this ended up, but it has. But my point is, I felt yesterday when the news dropped, Rutgers was not expecting it to drop, because you would think typically when you announce a co-situation, you either do it at the same time or you announce the more senior person first. And the fact that it didn't come from Thamel was kind of a bell going off for me that, hey, you know what, they didn't necessarily think this was coming out today. So now we have the complete story. Have not heard from Greg Schiano yet. Again, I'm recording this pretty much right after Robb Smith was reported by Pete Thamel as the co-defensive coordinator. He will call the plays. Third stint at Rutgers. Zach Sparber coming over from James Madison. Very good defense and a very good program. Again, the biggest thing with him, obviously he's going to have New Jersey recruiting connections. That's great. He's got the North Jersey connections with the Campanellis and those types of relationships. That's huge. He even has developed some of the players on the roster, including Brian Felter, offensive lineman at Bergen Catholic. So there's a lot of pluses with Sparber. It's just a matter of he's rather inexperienced, and now he's here to learn from Robb Smith. Robb Smith knows the Greg Schiano way inside and out. I just think it's fair to say, has he elevated the Schiano brand of defense in his 10 years previously? And I think, it's hard to say that he has. So while he's essentially being the professor to the student here, there's no doubt that Schiano is going to have to be involved. And I'm sure he wants to be. And that's fine. But that is contrary to, there's never been more on a head coach's plate than there is now with the portal, with NIL. Now, Rutgers has a robust staff in terms of administrators, in terms of recruiting, people that handle a lot of that legwork with the portal and NIL. But Schiano, to his credit, I think he excels, right, in a leadership role as like a CEO type. And that's always been, in terms of how he sells the program and how he represents the program and the culture he's built. We've always debated the X and O as part of his skill set, and no coach is perfect. And he offers a lot there, but, it's like an old wound, a scab that gets picked, in certain games. And I won't bring up that game this year with the old theory of a utilized that is kind of not even proven and it's pretty outdated. But anyway, I digress. Schiano is a CEO type football head coach. And to take away from some of those macro responsibilities, because I just feel with this dynamic, he's going to have to be more involved on a micro level, at least initially. I don't know if that's optimal in terms of where even he said when he got to Rutgers where he wants to be, where he talked about relinquishing more control, taking a step back, looking at the entire scope of things and letting his coaches coach. In terms of the defensive dynamic now, with so many personnel changes for next year, Schiano's going to have to be involved. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing in terms of his expertise and ability as a defensive coach. What I'm saying is there's so much responsibility now for a head coach. I don't think it's optimal or ideal that he's now back kind of in that position. And I think the hope was with the resources, with the momentum, you would have brought in a proven P4 coordinator with a track record of success. And respectfully to Robb Smith, he's not an exciting pick. Sparber could turn out to be a steal. And maybe 3 years from now, we're saying, wow, he is a dynamic DC. Schiano was a genius for bringing him on, tutoring him under Smith, and then giving him the keys 2 or 3 years later. And maybe that's already the built-in plan. I don't know. Nothing's even been released in terms of contracts. Again, this is a rapid reaction. I'm shooting from the hip here, and if I offend people, that's not the intention. I'm just trying to keep it real in terms of my initial reaction and some of the things I've already seen on social media. I mean, it's just not an inspiring hire. Doesn't mean it's a bad hire. Doesn't mean it's not going to work out. But I think there was a lot of hope that this would be an inspiring hire. And on a 2-month time frame, I think that context of it also makes it a little disappointing that it took that long to get to this point. So listen, spring camp, it was announced by the program. Spring game will be the last Saturday in April. So that means spring practice will start middle of March. So you're talking about in another 5-6 weeks, maybe. So there's a lot of work to be done. And again, I think just in terms of it being a transitional year personnel-wise with this defense, again, schemes, it's Schiano's defense. You're bringing in a guy. There is value to knowing Schiano inside and out. So I don't want to not emphasize that is a positive here. And, Sparber and Smith have a relationship. They worked together for a year. So obviously Smith believes in Sparber. Schiano believes in Sparber. And I'm sure the Campanellis, a lot of people in North Jersey think really highly of this guy. So I think that could end up being an inspiring pick. But again, just going back to my overall kind of point is 2 months in, going to a co-role. It was not where I think many thought this would go. I know a lot of people had hopes about, NFL coaches coming. I never really thought that. I said it last week. I never thought that was a real possibility. But, this is where we're at. And I think the dynamic of this, where the defense, it's crazy to be in a position where the Rutgers offense raises the ceiling, I think, for this program next year. And the defense is really key for the floor because the defense needs to be competent. If the offense can be pretty good and the defense competent, I mean, obviously we want the defense to be pretty good too, but I think the offense can be better than the defense next year. You just can't crash and burn with the defense. So the stability aspect, I'm almost like talking myself into Robb Smith a little bit as we're talking, but it's just, I think, it's not where you thought 2 months of a search and a lot of resources would bring you. But here we are. And welcome back, Robb Smith. Welcome, Zach Sparber. Schiano entering the 6th year of his second stint. and he's building, and there's momentum, certainly on the recruiting trail. This is a key year. The schedule is significantly harder, and now he's got his staff in place, barring any unexpected moves moving forward. And now you got to really dig into spring practice and get some real progress here and get this roster together. I'll have plenty more. I want to talk about the 26th recruiting class soon. Also want to talk about just in terms of the roster outlook. I'll have David Anderson back at some point as well. But thank you for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful podcast.